The room was full of powerful men. But the moment Kang Jae-won walked through that door, every single one of them faded into the background, because his eyes found her immediately. Like they had no choice. Like they had been trained to find her in every room without him ever giving them permission. Sophia Thompson, sitting at the far end of the conference table, poised, polished, glowing in a way that had nothing to do with the Lego sun coming through the floor-length windows behind her. And pregnant. Heavily. Undeniably. Pregnant. Jae-won did not stop walking. He could not. There were 12 men in that room watching the most feared name in Seoul's underground cross the floor like it was nothing. Like his chest had not just caved in. Like the world had not just tilted on its axis and forgotten to tilt back. He sat down. He picked up the agenda in front of him. He read nothing on it, because his eyes kept sliding, against every command he gave them, back to Sophia. To the gentle curve of her belly beneath that dress. To the man beside her who leaned in when she whispered something and smiled like he had earned the right to be that close to her. And the question that detonated quietly behind Jae-won's ribs was one he was not ready to ask himself. Whose child is that? Welcome to Afro-K romance fairy tale. On today's episode, you get a dose of betrayal, power, romance, love, unexpected encounters, and beautiful beginnings. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send the story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And also tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive back into this amazing story. 14 months before that Lagos conference room, Sophia Thompson sat across from Kang Jae-won in a Seoul office, so quiet you could hear the city breathing 40 floors below them. She had been summoned. Not invited. Summoned. The way powerful men send for things they've already decided to own. Except Sophia was not a thing. And Jae-won, in the months since she had arrived in Seoul to untangle his financial bleeding, had made the catastrophic mistake of learning that. She had walked into his world as a forensic financial specialist, brought in by his second-in-command to trace the leak destroying the syndicate's West African accounts. She had no idea, in the beginning, exactly whose empire she was saving. The organization hid behind 3 layers of legitimate corporate fronts. But Sophia was too sharp for 3 layers. She figured it out in 11 days. And on the 12th day, she walked into Jae-won's private office, placed a 40-page dossier on his desk, and said, quietly and without flinching, "I know what you are. I know what this is. And I know where your money is going." Every man before her had either bowed or run when they discovered the truth of Kang Jae-won. Sophia Thompson set the dossier down and waited for him to respond. That was the first time he looked at her. Truly looked. Not at the asset, not at the specialist, not at the woman his team had recommended. At her. The quiet steel behind her eyes. The complete, almost inconvenient absence of fear. He asked her why she hadn't run. She said she didn't run from problems she could solve. He hired her on the spot. Doubled the original contract. Gave her access she hadn't asked for. And then, over the following months, made the single most dangerous error of his carefully controlled life. He let her stay close. Not in the way his men stayed close, bound by loyalty or fear or money. Sophia stayed close the way a flame stays close to something it has already decided to consume. Their conversations started as briefings. They became debates. The debates became something neither of them named, because naming it would have made it real, and real things in Jae-won's world had a way of ending badly. She challenged him once in front of his entire inner circle. Called his strategy on the Lagos account reckless. Said it to his face, in front of 12 men who would have shaken at the thought of contradicting him. He overruled her in the meeting. He implemented her strategy 3 days later. He never told her he had. But she knew. She always knew. And somehow, in the spaces between all of that, between the tension and the power plays and the unspoken thing growing between them like something neither of them had planted but both of them were tending, Sophia Thompson became the one person Kang Jae-won could not afford to lose. Which was exactly why, on a cold Seoul Tuesday, he signed her transfer order to Lagos. He told himself it was strategy. The Lagos operation was bleeding from the inside, and he needed someone brilliant on the ground. Someone who understood both worlds, the polished corporate surface and the dangerous current running beneath it. Someone his enemies would never see coming because they would never imagine he trusted anyone that much. Sophia was the only name that made sense. That was what he told himself. What he did not tell himself, what he refused to sit with long enough to examine, was that every morning she walked into his building, something in him settled. That her voice in a briefing had become the thing he oriented toward the way a compass finds north without being asked. That the thought of something happening to her in Seoul, close to him, where his enemies knew his face and tracked his movements, that thought had started waking him up at 3 in the morning. In Jae-won's world, the people closest to him did not grow old peacefully. He had learned that at 19 when they took his brother. He had relearned it at 26 when he lost the only other person he had allowed near his chest. He was not going to relearn it with Sophia. So he called her in, gave her the briefing. Lagos. Immediate deployment. New cover identity. Fortified safe house. Direct line to his second-in-command, a man named Park who would report to Jae-won weekly on her safety. He slid the transfer documents across the desk without looking up. Sophia didn't touch them immediately. The silence stretched between them, long and loaded, and full of everything they had spent months not saying. Then she asked him one question. Is this what you want? And Jae-won, who had built an empire on the precision of his words, who had negotiated in 3 languages and never once said the wrong thing at the wrong moment, looked at the documents on his desk and said, "It's what the operation needs." Not an answer. Both of them knew it. Sophia picked up the pen, signed her name with the same steadiness she brought to everything, stood, straightened her jacket, and walked out of his office without looking back. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click that was somehow louder than anything Jae-won had ever heard in his life. He sat in that silence for a long time. Then he buried it. The way he buried everything that threatened to make him human in a world that punished humanity. He buried it, and he moved on. Except moving on, it turned out, had a different definition for a man who had Park send him weekly security reports that he read cover to cover. Who approved every resource request from the Lagos safe house personally rather than delegating it. Who knew, without being told, that Sophia had relocated from the initial safe house to an apartment in Victoria Island 4 months into the deployment because the original location had a compromised perimeter. He knew. He tracked. He told himself it was professional due diligence. Then the weekly report stopped. Not suddenly. They tapered, the way things do when whoever is managing them stops seeing the point. Park was stretched across 3 operations. The Lagos situation had stabilized. Sophia had embedded successfully into the local business network, built a credible cover, neutralized the internal threat to the syndicate's accounts by month 5. She had done exactly what she was sent to do. And then she had gone quiet. Not in a way that triggered alarms. There were no distress signals, no missed check-ins that crossed the threshold requiring escalation. She simply continued. Operating. Living. Disappearing, slowly and thoroughly, into a life that Jae-won could not see into anymore. He told himself that was fine. It was not fine. 3 months of near silence, and then Park placed a file on Jae-won's desk one morning and said, without inflection, the Lagos contact has fully embedded. The account network is clean. She's integrated into a local business circle. Sir, she's become quite visible in the legitimate sector. Jae-won opened the file. There were surveillance photos. Standard protocol for all deployed assets. Sophia at a business luncheon. Sophia at what appeared to be a charity gala. Sophia laughing. Actually laughing, at something the man beside her had said. The same man in 3 separate photos. Jae-won closed the file. Keep the operation status as is, he said. He did not ask about the man. He did not touch the file again. But that night, alone in his penthouse above Seoul, for the first time in months, he could not find the buried thing. Could not locate the place he had put it. It was gone. Or it had moved. Or it had grown too large for wherever he had stored it, and was now simply everywhere. And then Lagos called. Not Sophia. Not Park. His own business strategist, with news that the West African expansion had attracted interest from a coalition of high-value local investors. The kind of meeting that only happened once, the kind of room that did not grant second audiences. Jae-won had to go personally. There was no other option. He told himself that was the only reason his chest did something complicated when the flight path appeared on a screen, and Lagos filled the destination field. He packed for 4 days. He slept none of the flight. And when the convoy pulled up to the tower and he straightened his jacket in the reflection of the elevator doors, he was Kang Jae-won again, composed, controlled, completely impenetrable. Right up until the moment he walked into the conference room. And the world stopped. She did not see him immediately. That gave him 4, maybe 5 seconds to absorb the reality of her before he had to perform normalcy. And he used every one of those seconds with a desperation he would never have admitted to any living person. She was more beautiful than he remembered. That was the first thing his mind delivered. unwanted and precise. The kind of beautiful that had deepened rather than simply continued. Lagos had done something to her. Given her a settledness, a warmth, a comfort in her own presence that Seoul, with its danger and its secrets and its everything unspoken, had kept just slightly out of reach for her. She was glowing. And she was carrying a child that could have been 3 months from arriving or 2. Jae-won shook hands. He nodded. He said the right things in the right order. And behind every performed second of it, a question he had no right to ask was carving itself into his chest like something that intended to stay. How far along is she? 14 months. He had been gone 14 months. And she was. He sat down. Picked up the agenda. Read nothing. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Jae-won remembered none of it. He spoke when spoken to. He negotiated with the muscle memory of a man who had been doing this since his 20s. His mouth formed the right words. His hands made the right gestures. His face held the right expression of calm authority that made rooms defer to him without understanding why. But his eyes kept finding her. Sophia sat 3 seats to his left across the table, representing the local business coalition as their financial liaison. Of course she did. Of course she had built herself into something indispensable in this city the way she built herself into everything. Quietly, completely, without asking anyone's permission. She did not look at him again after that first fracture. That first moment when their eyes had met and something had broken open in her face for exactly 3 seconds before she sealed it back. She was too disciplined. Too composed. She asked questions in the meeting that were sharp and precise. Took notes in the margins of her documents. Nodded at the right moments. She was magnificent. And it was destroying him. Because the man beside her, mid-40s Lagos-born if Jae-won had to guess. Well-built in the way of someone who had been athletic once and maintained it. That man watched Sophia the way Jae-won had never allowed himself to watch her in Seoul. Openly. Warmly. With the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to hide about how he felt. When Sophia reached for her water glass, the man's hand moved slightly toward her. Not quite touching, just near. Available. Present. Jae-won set his pen down on the table because his grip on it had become unreasonable. The meeting closed with handshakes and the promise of a formal follow-up within 72 hours. The room began to empty in the slow, important way of rooms where everyone wants to be seen lingering. Jae-won did not move. He watched Sophia gather her documents. Watched her exchange quiet words with 2 of the coalition members. Watched the man beside her place a hand briefly on the small of her back as they both stood. Proprietary, gentle, completely natural. Something in Jae-won's chest went very still. Not cold. Still. The way a city goes still in the seconds before a storm that has been building all day finally decides to arrive. He waited. His team waited with him, reading his stillness the way good teams learn to read it. By doing nothing and making no sound. Sophia was almost at the door. Ms. Thompson. His voice came out exactly as he intended it. Even, controlled. Carrying just enough authority to be impossible to ignore without being loud enough to cause a scene. She stopped. The man beside her stopped too. Sophia turned slowly. And when she faced him fully, Jae-won saw it again. That 3-second crack in the surface. The flicker of something too big and too old to be simple surprise. Then the wall came back up. Mr. Kang, she said. Perfectly professional. The slightest emphasis on the formality of it. We are strangers here. Play the role. I wasn't aware you were part of the Lagos coalition, he said, standing. I wasn't aware you were handling this meeting personally, she returned. A beat. The man beside her was watching the exchange with the particular attention of someone who was smart enough to sense an undercurrent without yet knowing its name. I'd like a word, Jae-won said. When you have a moment. Sophia held his gaze for exactly long enough to communicate that she understood this was not a request, and that she had decided, on her own terms, to grant it anyway. Kwame, she said softly to the man beside her, I'll meet you downstairs. Kwame. The man had a name now. It landed somewhere in Jae-won's chest and lodged there. Kwame looked at Sophia. Then at Jae-won. Then back at Sophia. And whatever he saw in her face made him nod, touch her arm briefly, and leave without comment. The room emptied. And for the first time in 14 months, Kang Jae-won and Sophia Thompson were alone. The silence was enormous. It had texture. It had history. It had 11 months of soul compressed into it. Every conversation that had become too real. Every moment where one of them had stood at the edge of something and stepped back. Every word that had been chosen carefully because the honest one was too dangerous. Sophia spoke first. You look well, she said. Still composed. Still distant. A performance so good he almost believed it, except he knew her, and he knew the slight tension at the corner of her mouth that meant she was working very hard to sound like she wasn't. Sophia. If this is about the operation, she said, everything is documented. Park has the full handover files. The account network is clean. My contract obligations are. You know this isn't about the operation. She stopped. The composure flickered. Then what is it about, Jae-won? And there it was, the slightest fracture in a professional surface. His name in her mouth instead of his title. His real name, the one she had used in Seoul only in private, only in the moments when the distance between them had collapsed despite everything they did to maintain it. He looked at her. All of her. Let himself do what he had not permitted in the meeting room. Really look. At the woman he had sent away. At the life visibly growing inside her. At the composed, settled, thriving person standing in front of him who had taken the silence he gave her and built something real from it. It should have made him glad. It felt like grief. How long? He asked quietly. She knew exactly what he was asking. Something moved across her face. Not the professional fracture. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like pain deciding whether to become anger. 7 months, she said. 7 months. Jae-won did the mathematics that had been burning at the back of his skull since the moment he saw her. 14 months since he sent her away. 7 months along. Which meant the timing was. He couldn't breathe properly. Sophia. Her name came out differently that time. Not controlled. Not performative. Raw in a way he had never permitted himself to be in front of another person. Don't, she said. Softly. But with the firmness of a woman who had already survived the version of this conversation she'd had alone. Don't do that. Don't stand there and do the math in front of me like I'm a problem you're solving. I'm not. You sent me away. 3 words. Quiet as a closing door. No explanation. No conversation. A transfer order, and a new cover identity and silence. Jae-won. 14 months of silence. Her voice stayed level but her eyes were doing something that made his chest feel like it was being taken apart carefully, piece by piece. You don't get to walk into a room and look at me like that. Like what? He asked. Even though he knew. Like I still belong to you, she said. Before you hear what Jae-won said next, and trust me, what he says next will break something in you. Tell me in the comments, do you think Sophia should let him back in? Drop your city and your answer below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now because part 4 is where everything unravels. And you cannot miss it. The words landed between them like something dropped from a great height. Like I still belong to you. Jae-won did not answer immediately. He was not a man who spoke before he was ready. That discipline had saved his life more times than any weapon. But this was different. This was not strategy. This was the truth arriving uninvited, standing in front of him in a Lagos conference room with 7 months of life between them, waiting. Do you? He asked. Sophia blinked. It was the one response she had not prepared for. She had prepared for denial. For the careful, controlled Jae-won who managed every conversation like a negotiation. For the man who would apologize formally and redirect professionally, and leave her with something that looked like closure, but tasted like nothing. She had not prepared for that question. That's not fair, she said quietly. I know, he said. Answer it anyway. She looked away. Out the floor-length windows where Lagos sprawled golden and relentless in the afternoon light. The city that had taken her in when Seoul had released her, that had given her community and purpose in Kwame, who was warm and present and safe in all the ways that Kang Jae-won had never allowed himself to be. I build a life here, she said. Not an answer, but not a denial either. I can see that. A real one. Not a cover. Not an operation. She turned back to him. I have people here who know my actual name. Who know me. I have a home that doesn't have a perimeter sweep schedule. The edge in her voice was not anger. It was something more complicated. The exhaustion of someone who had loved something dangerous, and chosen, eventually, to love themselves more. I have a child coming who deserves a world that isn't built on secrets and signed transfer orders. Sophia. His voice was low. Private. The way it had only ever been in Seoul when they were the last 2 people in a room, and the careful distance between them had worn thin. Is the child mine? The silence that followed was the loudest thing Jae-won had ever heard. Sophia looked at him for a long time. Something ancient and complicated moving behind her eyes. The arithmetic of pain, of pride, of a woman deciding how much truth she owed a man who had chosen strategy over her. Why does it matter? She asked softly. You know why it matters. Say it then. Her chin lifted slightly. Say why it matters, Jae-won. Out loud. In this room. No strategy. No management. Say the actual reason. And Kang Jae-won, who had negotiated with crime lords and government officials, who had never in his adult life said the true thing when a safer thing was available, felt the careful architecture of everything he had built around himself begin, quietly and irrevocably, to come apart. Because I never stopped, he said. Not for a single day. Not one. Sophia's eyes filled. She didn't let them spill. She was too composed for that, too practiced in the art of containing herself. But the filling was visible, and it undid him more than tears would have. You set me away, she whispered. I know. You chose the Empire. I chose your safety. His jaw tightened. You don't know what was happening in Seoul at that time. What they were planning. There were 3 separate contracts on people close to me that quarter. 3, Sophia. My driver. My accountant. A woman I had spoken to twice at a function who someone decided mattered to me. His voice stayed even, but the weight behind it was immense. You were becoming visible. To me. Which meant becoming visible to them. And I couldn't, he stopped. Breathed. I couldn't put your name on that list. She stared at him. You could have told me that, she said. If I had told you that, you wouldn't have left. The truth of it settled over both of them like something heavy and undeniable. He was right. They both knew he was right. Sophia Thompson did not leave problems she could solve. She had said it to his face the very first day. If he had explained the danger, she would have argued, strategized, refused. She would have stayed. And she might not have survived staying. So you made the decision for me, she said. Not quite accusation. Not quite forgiveness. Something suspended between the two. Yes, he said simply. That's the most arrogant thing you've ever done. I know that too. Something shifted in the room then. Not resolution. They were nowhere near resolution. But the specific, excruciating tension of 2 people who have been holding a conversation hostage for over a year finally releasing it. Letting it exist in the air between them in all its complicated, unfinished truth. Sophia lowered herself into a chair. Slowly, the way heavily pregnant women navigate chairs, with a careful negotiation of weight and gravity. Jae-won moved without thinking, a hand extending toward her elbow to steady her. She let him. That small permission detonated quietly in his chest. He sat across from her. Not the boardroom distance of earlier. Closer. The distance of a real conversation. His name is Kwame, Sophia said. Her voice was different now. The professional surface was gone. This was the voice he remembered from Seoul. Direct. Unguarded. Real. He's a good man. He was there when I was navigating a city alone and pregnant and terrified and completely unwilling to let anyone know I was terrified. A small, complicated smile. He didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. He just showed up. Jae-won absorbed this. The way good men absorb things that hurt. Without flinching. Without making the hurt someone else's problem. Is he the father? He asked again. Quieter this time. Sophia looked at him steadily. Kwame knows he isn't the biological father, she said carefully. He came into my life when I was 4 months along. The mathematics completed themselves in Jae-won's chest with a slow, devastating precision of something that has always been true finally being permitted to land. He was very still. Sophia. I wasn't going to contact you, she said. Firmly. Without apology. I made that decision consciously. This child deserves a present father, not a man whose empire will always come first. Not a man who makes decisions about my life without consulting me. Her hand rested gently on her belly, instinctive, protective. Kwame wants to be here. He's chosen this. Every single day. And what did I choose? Jae-won's voice was barely above quiet. You chose Lagos, she said simply. 14 months ago. You just didn't know you were choosing it. He sat with that for a long time. Outside, Lagos continued. Indifferent and magnificent, the way great cities are indifferent to private devastations happening inside their buildings. Traffic noise drifted up 40 floors. Somewhere below them, Kwame was waiting. Jae-won looked at Sophia, at the woman who had walked into his boardroom in Seoul without fear and walked out of his life with more grace than he had deserved, who had taken the silence he gave her and turned it into something living. I want to be involved, he said, in whatever form you'll allow, whatever shape that takes. I'm not asking you to, he stopped. Reorganized. I'm not asking you to undo anything. What you've built. What Kwame is to you. I'm not that man. He held her gaze. But I am asking you not to let me be a stranger to my child. Sophia studied him. Long, careful. The way she studied everything. With the full, unhurried attention of someone who needed to understand a thing completely before deciding what to do with it. You'd have to stay, she said quietly. Not forever, but consistently. You have to show up in ways that aren't managed from a distance through park and security reports. He didn't ask how she knew about the reports. Of course she knew. I know, he said. And Jae-won. Her voice softened. Just slightly. Just enough. The Empire cannot come first. Not this time. Not with this. He looked at her. At everything she was and everything she had become, and the life growing between them, that was the most honest thing he had ever accidentally created. It won't, he said. And for the first time in his life, Kang Jae-won said the true thing without calculating whether it was safe. 3 days passed. Jae-won extended his Lagos stay without explanation to his team. They didn't ask. Teams that survived long enough in his world learned which silences to respect. He checked into a suite at Lagos Continental. Ordered nothing. Slept very little. Sat at the window watching this loud, brilliant, relentless city that had taken the woman he had quietly loved for 14 months and turned her into someone even more extraordinary than the person he had sent away. He hated that. He was grateful for it. Both things lived in him simultaneously, and he had no idea what to do with either of them. On the second morning, his phone rang. Park. Sole business requiring a decision only Jae-won could authorize. He handled it in 4 minutes, hung up, and sat looking at the phone in his hand like it was something he was only now seeing clearly. His whole life was in that phone. The Empire. The operations. The network of obligations and dangers and loyalties that had defined every waking hour since he was 19 years old. He had sent Sophia to Lagos to protect her from that phone. And now he was sitting in her city, asking to be let back in, with that same phone still running the same empire, still generating the same dangers. He needed to reckon with that. Honestly. Without strategy. He called Park back. I need a full structural review, he said. The sole operation. Every division. I want to know what can be legitimized, what can be transferred, and what has to be dismantled. Park was quiet for a moment that spoke volumes. Sir, he said carefully. That is a significant undertaking. I know what it is, Jae-won said. Start it. He hung up, sat back, and for the first time in 20 years felt something that might, if he gave it room, become peace. On the 3rd day Sophia called him. Not Park. Not through a liaison. Her name appearing on his screen directly, which meant she had gone to the effort of finding his personal number, a number that existed in approximately 6 places in the world. He answered before the second ring. There's something I need to tell you, she said. No greeting. Straight to it. The way she had always been. I'm listening. A pause. Longer than her usual pauses. The kind of pause that had weight in it. When you sent me to Lagos, she began slowly. You said it was to stabilize the West African accounts. To find the internal leak. Yes. I found the leak, she said. Month 5. I told you that. You did. I didn't tell you everything about what I found. Jae-won went very still. In 20 years of running an empire, his instincts had never once mislabeled a moment. And every instinct he possessed was suddenly, simultaneously alert. Sophia, he said carefully. What did you find? Another pause. The leak wasn't random, she said. It wasn't a disgruntled lieutenant or a compromised accountant. It was structured. Deliberate. Someone inside your operation was systematically redirecting funds with a sophistication that took me 3 months to fully trace. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the thing underneath it. The thing she had been carrying. When I traced it all the way back, Jae-won, the source account traces to Seoul. To someone in your innermost circle. The room temperature seemed to drop. Who? He said. Not a question. A command. She said a name. And Kang Jae-won, who had not shown shock in front of another person since he was 19 years old, felt the blood leave his face. The name she said was Park. His second in command. The man he had trusted with 20 years of secrets. The man he had assigned to monitor Sophia's safety in Lagos. The man who had been sending him weekly security reports, or not sending them, when they tapered off, when Sophia went quiet. The man who had been the one to recommend Sophia for the sole position in the first place. Jae-won stood up from the window. How long have you known? His voice was almost frighteningly calm. 7 months, she said quietly. 7 months. The same length as her pregnancy. Sophia. Something terrible was assembling itself in his chest. Did Park know about the child? The pause that followed was the longest of the entire conversation. Yes, she said softly. He contacted me. For months into the pregnancy. Said he knew whose child it was. Said if I ever told you what I'd found, about the accounts about him, he would make sure you never believed the child was yours. He had documentation fabricated. Photos. A constructed timeline of me and Kwame that predated when Kwame and I actually met. Her voice stayed steady, but he could hear a coster. He told me my silence was the price of my child's safety. The room was absolutely silent. Jae-won stood at the Lagos window and felt something he had not felt since he was a grieving 19-year-old who had just lost his brother to the cruelty of this world. Rage. Pure, clarifying, devastating rage. Not the cold strategic anger he deployed as a tool. Something older and more human. The fury of a man had sacrificed the most important thing in his life to protect it, and discovered that the danger had been inside the house the entire time. Park had orchestrated the financial leak to divert syndicate funds into his own network. Had recommended Sophia specifically because her skills would eventually uncover it, and then had positioned himself as her safety contact in Lagos, giving him direct access to contain her when she did. Had used the pregnancy, used Jae-won's own child, as leverage to buy her silence. And Jae-won had sent her there. Directly into it. Sophia. Her name in his mouth was barely a sound. I sent you to him. You didn't know, she said immediately. Firmly. Not absolution. Honesty. You couldn't have known. I should have. You couldn't have known, she repeated. Softer this time. The firmness giving way to something that sounded like the 14 months of distance finally, fractionally, closing. Jae-won. I'm not telling you this to assign blame. I'm telling you because, she stopped. He heard her breathe. Because you asked me not to let you be a stranger to your child. And I decided that means I cannot let you be a stranger to this either. To what's actually happening. You deserve the truth. All of it. He closed his eyes. In 20 years he had made thousands of decisions. Strategic, calculated, merciless when necessary. He had built an empire on the precision of his judgment. And the only decision that had ever truly mattered. The one to send her away, to protect her, to sacrifice the one real thing he had delivered her directly into the hands of the one person capable of using her against him. The irony was almost architectural in its cruelty. Where are you right now, he asked. Home, she said. Victoria Island. I'm coming. Jae-won. I'm not asking to fix anything tonight, he said quietly. I'm not coming to negotiate or manage or make decisions you haven't agreed to. The words arrived without strategy. Without armor. I just need to see you. Please. The silence on her end was different from all the previous silences. It was not loaded or complicated or full of history. It was soft. Okay, she said. One word. Small and enormous simultaneously. He arrived at her Victoria Island apartment as Lagos settled into its electric night. She opened the door herself. No staff, no Kwame, just Sophia in a simple dress with her magnificent, rounded presence and her steady eyes that saw straight through everything he had ever constructed around himself. She stepped back to let him in. He crossed the threshold, and standing in the warm light of her home, this real, lived-in, beautiful space that smelled like her and had books on the shelves and a half-finished cup of tea on the coffee table and a small collection of baby items beginning to accumulate in the corner. Kang Jae-won felt the last of the architecture come down. Not the empire. The wall. The one he had built at 19 and maintained for 20 years and sent women away rather than let them near. Sophia watched it happen on his face. She saw it. All of it. The way she had always seen him more clearly than he saw himself. She crossed the room. And she placed his hand on her belly. Neither of them spoke. He felt the movement beneath his palm. That astonishing, terrifying, luminous flutter of life. And something in Kang Jae-won broke open so completely and so finally that he understood, standing there, that it was never going to close again. He didn't want it to. I'm going to dismantle it, he said quietly. The operation. Not overnight. But completely. I started the process yesterday. Sophia looked up at him. Something moving in her eyes that was careful and wondering, and not yet convinced, and exactly honest. That's a big promise, she said softly. It's not a promise, he said. It's a decision. I've already made it. His hand stayed on her belly. Warm. Present. The only empire worth building is one she can grow up proud of. Sophia's breath caught. She whispered. The ghost of something, the rarest thing on the face of Kang Jae-won, appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Park surveillance reports," he said quietly. Before I knew what he was thorough. A tear escaped down Sophia's cheek before she could compose it back. He caught it with his thumb. Gently. The way a man touches something he has been terrified of losing, and has finally, against every odd, been allowed to hold. "I'm still angry at you," she whispered. "I know," he said. "This isn't fixed. I know that too. Kwame is important to me. That doesn't disappear. I'm not asking it to." He held her gaze. "I'm asking for the chance to be what I should have been. What I would have been if I hadn't been so." He stopped. Found the honest word. "Afraid." Sophia looked at him for a long, searching moment. Then she leaned her forehead forward and rested it against his chest. Slowly. The way someone puts down something they've been carrying alone for a very long time. His arms came around her, and Kang Jae-won held the woman he loved and the daughter he didn't know he had, and the terrifying, wide-open future of a man who had finally chosen the right thing. In a warm apartment in Lagos, while the city blazed and roared outside, completely indifferent to the fact that something broken had just, quietly, begun to heal. Some people spend their whole lives building walls so strong that nothing dangerous can get in, without ever stopping to ask what they're keeping out along with the danger. Jae-won built an empire to survive, and nearly lost the only thing worth surviving for. Sophia built herself back from silence and deserved every piece of the life she created. What came next for both of them would not be simple, but for the first time it would be honest. Now tell me, do you think Sophia should give Jae-won a real second chance, or has too much been broken to rebuild? And what do you think she should do about Kwame, the man who showed up when Jae-won wouldn't? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story moved you, wrecked you, or made you feel something real, share it with someone who needs a good story today. Subscribe if you haven't, hit the notification bell, and come back for the next episode, because on Afro-K Romance Fairy Tale, the story never ends where you expect it to. See you next time.